Hello, this is Miss Marianne, and I'm back again with another story by Beatrix Potter. It is part of the public domain, which means anybody can share it, so let me share it with you. This is the tale of Squirrel Nutkin by Beatrix Potter. Now, it's a tale about a tale that belonged to a little red squirrel, and his name was Nutkin. He had a brother called Twinkleberry and a great many cousins. They lived in a wood at the edge of a lake. In the middle of the lake there is an island covered with trees and nut bushes, and amongst those trees stands a hollow oak tree, which is the house of an owl whose name is Old Brown. You see Old Brown there swooping into his cool tree house? One autumn, when the nuts were ripe and the leaves on the hazel bushes were golden and green, Nutkin and Twinkleberry and all the other little squirrels came out of the woods and down to the edge of the lake. They made little rafts out of twigs, and they paddled away over the water to Owl Island to gather nuts. Each squirrel had a little sack and a large oar, and he spread out his tail for a sail. Look at all those little squirrel boats. They also took with them an offering of 3 fat mice as a present for Old Brown, and they put them down on his doorstep. Then Twinkleberry and the other little squirrels each made a low bow and said politely, "Oh, Mr. Brown, will you favor us with permission to gather nuts upon your island?" But Nutkin was excessively impertinent, which means rude, in his manners. He bobbed up and down like a little red cherry, singing, riddle me, rot-a-tote-tote, a wee little man in a red, red coat, a staff in his hand and a stone in his throat. If you'll tell me this riddle, I'll give you a groat. Do you know the answer to Nutkin's riddle? Well, it was a cherry. See, it has a red coat. The stem is like a staff or a walking stick, and inside there is a stone, or the cherry pit. But you know what Mr. Brown did? He paid no attention to Nutkin whatsoever. He shut his eyes and he went to sleep. Well, that day the squirrels filled their little sacks with nuts, and then they sailed away home in the evening. But next morning they all came back to Owl Island, and Twinkleberry and the others brought a fine fat mole and laid it on the stone in front of Old Brown's doorway, and said, "Mr. Brown, with your favor, we will gather more nuts." But Nutkin, who had no respect, began dancing up and down, tickling old Mr. Brown with a nettle. Do you see that there? That's that plant right there in his paws. And this is what he sung. "Oh, Mr. B, riddle me ree, hitty-pitty within the walls, hitty-pitty without the walls. If you touch hitty-pitty, hitty-pitty will bite you." Do you know the answer to the riddle? Well, it was right there in his paws. It was the nettle. You might find these in your yard. If you do, don't touch them. The leaves have little hairs on them that will sting you. Now, what did the owl do? Mr. Brown woke up suddenly, and he carried the mole into his house. He shut the door in Nutkin's face, and presently a little thread of blue smoke from the wood fire came up from the top of the tree, and Nutkin peeped through the keyhole and sang, "A house full, a hole full, and you can't gather a bowl full." Now, of course, he was making a riddle about the smoke. You can't catch smoke in a bowl, can you? Well, the squirrels searched for nuts all over the island and filled their little sacks, but Nutkin gathered oak apples, which is what this is right here. Another word for them is gall. They're where an oak tree has a problem and it creates a little ball. But Nutkin used them for marbles, and he played upon a beech stump, watching old Mr. Brown's door. On the third day the squirrels got up very early and went fishing. They caught 7 fat minnows as a present for Old Brown. They paddled over the lake and landed under a crooked chestnut tree on Owl Island. Twinkleberry and the 6 other little squirrels each carried a fat minnow, but Nutkin, who had no nice manners, brought no present at all. Instead, he ran around singing, "The man in the wilderness said to me, 'How many strawberries grow in the sea?' I answered him, as I thought good, 'As many red herrings as grow in the wood.'" Herrings are fish. But old Mr. Brown took no interest in riddles, not even when the answer was provided for him. On the 4th day the squirrels brought a present of 6 fat beetles, which were just as good as plums in plum-pudding for Old Brown. Each beetle was wrapped up in a dock leaf and fastened with a pine needle pin. But Nutkin sang as rudely as ever, "Oh, Mr. B! Oh, Mr. B! Riddle me ree! Flower of England, fruit of Spain, met together in a shower of rain, put in a bag tied round with a string. If you tell me this riddle, I'll give you a ring." Now the answer to the riddle was plum pudding. But the whole thing about the ring was ridiculous, because Nutkin didn't have a ring to give to Old Brown. The other squirrels hunted up and down the nut bushes, but Nutkin gathered a robin's pincushion off a briar bush and stuck them full of pine needles. I had to look this one up. This is what's called a robin's pincushion. It's another form of a problem that a rose bush can get. You should look for one if you get a chance. Now, on the 5th day, the squirrels brought a present of wild honey. It was so sweet and sticky that they licked their little fingers as they put it down upon the stone. They'd stolen it out of a bumblebee's nest on the tippy top of the hill. But Nutkin skipped up and down, singing, "Hum-a-buzz-buzz, hum-a-buzz-buzz. As I went over Tipple-Tine, I met a flock of bonny swine. Some yellow-nacked, some yellow-backed. They were the veriest bonny swine that e'er went over Tipple-Tine." I don't even get this one, but he's talking about bees. Old Mr. Brown turned up his eyes in disgust at the impertinence of Nutkin, but he did eat the honey. The squirrels filled their little sacks with nuts, but Nutkin sat upon a big flat rock and played ninepins, which is what we would call bowling. Do you see? He's using the pine cones for bowling pins, and he's got a crab apple there as a bowling ball. On the 6th day, which was Saturday, the squirrels came again for the last time. They brought a new-laid egg in a little rush basket as a last parting present for Old Brown. But Nutkin ran in front laughing and shouting, "Humpty Dumpty sat on a wall, Humpty Dumpty had a great fall. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't put Humpty together again." Now old Mr. Brown took an interest in eggs. He opened one eye and shut it again, but he still did not speak. Nutkin became more and more impertinent. "Oh, Mr. B! Oh, Mr. B! Hickamore, hackamore on the king's kitchen door. All the king's horses and all the king's men couldn't drive Hickamore, hackamore off the king's kitchen door." Now the answer to this one is sunlight. Nutkin danced up and down like a sunbeam, but still Old Brown said nothing. Nutkin began again. "Arthur O'Barrow has broken his band. He comes roaring up the land. The King of Scots with all his power can't turn Arthur out of bower." Nutkin then made a whirring noise like the sound of wind, which was the answer to the riddle, and he took a running jump right onto the head of Old Brown. Then all at once there was a flutterment and a scufflement and a loud squeak. The other squirrels scuttled away into the bushes. When they came back very cautiously, peeping round the tree, there was Old Brown sitting on his doorstep, quite still, with his eyes closed, as if nothing had happened. But Nutkin was in his pocket. This looks like it's the end of the story, but it isn't. Old Brown carried Nutkin into his house and held him up by the tail. He intended to eat him, but Nutkin pulled so very hard that his tail broke in two, and he dashed up the staircase and escaped out the attic window. And to this day, if you meet Nutkin up a tree, do you see him there? He's the one who's got the little short tail. If he will throw sticks at you and stamp his feet and shout if you bother to ask him a riddle. He'll say, and that is the end of the tale of Squirrel Nutkin. I hope you enjoyed this. Have a great day.